Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe, New Mexican about interesting people, issues, and places of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and today we are talking to Andrew Erdmann and Sara Fox, both with the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission, and they're going to be talking about a planning process that has been going on for a long time to help us with our regional water uses. Welcome, Andrew and Sara.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks very much for having us.
Good morning. Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you, guys. And let's start off with maybe, Sara, just explain what is the Interstate Water Commission to begin with, Stream Commission.
Yes. Yeah. So the Interstate Stream Commission is a small state agency that is headed by an actual commission of 9 people that is appointed by the governor. And the Interstate Stream Commission is charged with mainly making sure that we are complying with our interstate compacts. So Rio Grande Compact, Colorado River Compact, and then also in this agency is water planning.
Okay.
So we're a little different than the rest of the agency, but still doing kind of statewide level important work to make sure New Mexicans have water.
That makes sense because obviously water is a scarce resource. Now, Andrew, maybe just update people. And I know you guys all have different areas of expertise. The Rio Grande Compact is a huge one because that's the one where we deliver water to Texas, and we just maybe made a deal on that.
All of those things are correct, and honestly, it is not the part of the agency that Sara and I really work in. So
Right.
I can't really speak to it much more than that. But that summary is exactly right. And then the other compacts are on different rivers. So there's the Pecos River Compact and then the Colorado Compact. Those are the ones people are most familiar with.
Right. And the Colorado Compact, which I do the histories at the paper that run 100 years ago. And then they signed it. They were at Bishop's Lodge, and they actually had a front page story about how it was being signed. And I guess it's pretty much run out. And now we're figuring out the details. And that's important because that goes all the way to California. And it's basically allocates water to the different users in the different states, and hopefully that will be worked out so farmers can have water, cities can have water, and maybe the city of Las Vegas won't water so much outside, because that's one of the interesting things is how water is being used, for flowers that you can't eat and agriculture products that maybe horses eat but not people.
Sure. Yeah, well, for our side and the planning part of things, we're mostly looking at how water gets used just inside New Mexico, which feels like a lot already. Man, it's overwhelming to think about Las Vegas and places so far away as well. But yeah, most of the work that we do is focused on looking at how we use water differently across the state. And you're right, one of the big differences is New Mexico uses a lot of water for agriculture all over the state, and trying to figure out how to kind of balance that with good investments in water infrastructure and how you handle cities and growth in cities, and also agricultural water use, and the water projections that we're looking at, which are kind of showing that we're expecting to have less water and to have a lot more of that water come in kind of bigger events. So
so if you're not equipped to catch the water, let's say you have 2 inches of rain in a couple of hours, if you're not equipped to store that in some way or capture it, you're going to be left with not having the water to use as you would have if it had come in a snowstorm and sat all winter in snowpack.
Yeah, I guess that's right. So I mean, we're looking at a year like that this year where we had a really a poor snowpack last winter, which almost feels like a distant memory for me sitting here in Santa Fe, that's because we've had all this water and rain this summer, but it's still really, the reservoirs are really low right now, and the stream is the Rio Grande is pretty much
not
empty.
So grand.
That's right. I mean, we've had more water in the Santa Fe River here in town than in the Rio Grande at times this summer. So kind of unprecedented times that we're looking at ahead of us.
Yeah. And Sara, would you say that we obviously we need to plan better, but we're not to the point where we don't have enough water for what we need. We might just used to maybe store it differently, use it differently, and that's kind of what you guys are involved in helping us do?
So I think it's a little bit like our job is a little bit even a further step back. So we're going to have less water in the future, which means we're going to need to think about how we use our water differently in the future. I think there'll probably always be water in the Rio Grande. It just might look, a little bit different timing or a little bit different amount or varying amounts because of different, extreme events. But regional water planning is really the process that we're going through right now with all the input that we've received last year and this year. And with the Water Security Planning Act is aiming to set up a process by which communities can come together and engage with each other to solve kind of the challenges that we're looking forward to.
Okay. Now, Andrew, what has the process been to to form those rules? Because this has been going on a while. You had public hearings across the state, and public comment is going to close probably after this airs. But then you have an actual hearing on these formal rules. What's been going on? Give us the background.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of work on this, as Sarah mentioned. So I think really we got started. So the Water Security Planning Act is the reason we're doing all these rules. That passed in 2023. Starting last summer, or all across last summer, we went and had meetings. We call them open house events. We had one here in Santa Fe, and I'm not exactly sure the date right now, but we had one here in Santa Fe, right in the rail yard last summer, and the space upstairs there, kind of roughly above the REI. The purpose of all those was to collect input about how these rules are going to look. And we have a set of things that we need to address that are called for by the act that say, you need rules about the following things. Among those is like what the regional boundaries look like. So if you think about the whole state, this is kind of how you would cut that up, like what the internal divisions would be that you would use to bound planning. So we looked at things like watershed boundaries. And when I say looked at, what I mean is we ask questions at these events to collect input about people's preferred way of doing this. So looking at things like administrative boundaries, like if we were to take a couple of counties and use that together, that had some administrative benefits because it's easy to figure out how to work with counties. On the other hand, they don't have a great deal to do with how watersheds work and the way that the water moves. So there's a trade-off there. So we ask questions about things like that to kind of get at what people wanted to see from water planning. And then we use the answers from that as the basis for the rules that, as you mentioned, we have posted now, and we're collecting input on for a hearing that's in the middle of next month. So a month from today, we'll be in the middle of it, October 15th, 16th, and 17th.
Okay. Sarah, what do those rules control? Are they like how many wells somebody can drill? Are they to help people reclaim natural streams and fix riparian habits? Or is it about how much you can irrigate for agriculture? Talk about what the rules do and what are they?
Yeah, so the rules, I think, like, I'm going to step us back a process again. All the details kind of that you discussed are things that would come out potentially out of this process. The rules that we have set out essentially set out a framework by which regional planning will go forward. So essentially, Andrew was talking about kind of the regional boundaries. So we have proposed a regional boundary for the state. We've proposed a regional planning council of like who should be at the table for this regional planning process. We've proposed like how many public meetings each region needs to go through to make a plan. And we've proposed what are the contents of those regional water plans. So a lot of what we've done is kind of the process aspect of planning. I like to say like planning to plan or setting up the scaffolding so that we can bring communities together to have, conversations that are going to be difficult because we're looking at less water. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. Like this is going to be a hard process, but we're
Right.
hoping that we've set up enough structure that they can be productive conversations for when, both like our kind of looming challenges, but also immediate challenges arise. We have a space and a process by which we can start to think about these kind of big problems
Okay.
together.
Sarah, I'll do a follow-up with you. Is this something that we haven't been doing before, or is this just a fixing of a past process?
So we've actually had a regional planning process in the state of New Mexico since 1987, which is before I was around, much longer. I wasn't, no. Um, and so the state has actually done 2 rounds of regional planning process in the future. So the process we're going through now builds on both like criticism successes of those last 2 processes.
Okay.
Um, one of the reasons that the Water Security Planning Act was passed is because the 1987 statute was largely seen as being has met its goal,
Okay.
which was protecting our water from kind of out of state transfers, mostly from Texas. And so the Water Security Planning Act kind of threw out that old statute and re-put in this new statute that is really much more forward thinking, much more focused on community engagement, much more focused on both problem solving and getting together to help solve our problems rather than this more like reactionary way that the statute was before.
All
So it's
right.
a little bit of a re-envisioning, revamping, taking kind of the building on the shoulders of giants, all of those other metaphors.
Okay. We'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We're back with Andrew and Sara from the Interstate Stream Commission talking about the need for regional water planning. Andrew, I'll go back to you and tell me, what is a region? Is New Mexico one region, or do we have like 5 regions in the state, 4 regions in the state? So when you're talking about regional planning and rules for that, how much of our area are you talking about?
Yeah, thanks. So that's one of the questions that we're trying to answer or have a proposal for in the rules that we have out right now. So in the past, there have been 16 regions around the state. So when we had meetings last summer, we went to 16 to visit the previous regions that had existed. And that was really a lot. 16 is the same number that they have in Texas. In Texas, of course, much larger area and a whole lot more people. So we're trying to get to fewer than that, was one of the thoughts. So the proposal has 9 regions in it. Santa Fe is one of the places that really, well, really this is true almost everywhere. But since we're talking about Santa Fe, it's a place that could sort of be considered part of more than one region. So we're thinking about 9 areas of the state. That's maybe the size of 2 or 3 counties, if that geography helps people envision the size we're talking about. So when you think about Santa Fe, it has several sources of water. We have the water, of course, coming from the watershed here. There's the San Juan Chama water, and there's the groundwater that's pulled out regionally. And so in some ways that could kind of tie us into different places, right? So the water that returns down the Santa Fe River, for example, ends up in Cochiti. And Santa Fe has a lot in common with Albuquerque and could kind of be treated as a big area. On the other hand, the groundwater we use up here underlies places like Nabe, Powake, and Tesuque, right? And so it impacts us to some extent to the north, and so does some of that San Juan Chama water and the way that relates. So the real question you're looking at the regions is kind of, how do you draw the lines and figure out how to plan? And really, there's probably more than one way to do it well. And a lot of what's important is going to be and this was a lot of the reason we did all the outreach we did, is just to make sure that we're doing in a way that makes sense for the people who live in that particular region. So in Santa Fe and in a lot of the areas that are adjacent to mountains and close to the rivers, people really prefer like hydrologically based regions. So basically watershed based regions, and the proposed watershed, or the proposed regional map we have, is based largely on that. But there are also parts of the state where people are mostly use groundwater or entirely use groundwater, places like the Estancia Basin, where groundwater is really the dominant feature. And I mean, it's still kind of a watershed boundary, but it's really based on groundwater use more than it's based on surface water.
Okay.
So there are proposals for we tried to do the best we could of making it work on the best principle for each individual region. So,
Okay. Well, obviously that's very complicated, and it seems like, Sarah, that when you're talking about these regions, you've got so many interests because you're going to have the municipalities, you're going to have the farmers, in a lot of parts of the state, you're going to have tribal interests, and in so many years in the past, they didn't talk to the tribes, and now we are doing that, and then you have like small acequias and just the different participants and everybody needs water. So how do you kind of figure out all those interests and give them the weight they deserve without favoring one or the other?
It's a really great question. So in our proposed rule, there's kind of two components I want to touch on. So first, our Pueblos, Tribes, and Nations, as called for by the Water Security Planning Act, have a dedicated process, which is the Water Security Tribal Advisory Council, WISTAC. So that is a group that has been in parallel this entire outreach effort. And in our rule is memorialized and is a group that we intend to support as the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission going forward to ensure that tribal voices, sovereignty, and water rights are considered in any planning process that interacts with tribal land. So that's the first one. The second aspect of your question was how do we balance people's kind of all the various needs that we have? So that really comes down to the proposed council composition. So in the rule, we have laid out a proposal of how we want to bring people to the table and kind of mechanisms and pathways by which other people can be involved and empowered in this process. So I would encourage people to visit both our website, Mainstream New Mexico, mainstreamnm.org, and the OSC website to view the rule, to look kind of all the details of how that council is formed and the process. We lay out a process by which we will be initiating those councils. And then hopefully these councils continue to be an entity that kind of goes forward with water planning across the state that is supported by ISC, but ultimately regionally led.
Okay. Because I know, I remember years ago, the city of Albuquerque was discharging water and there was some kind of pollutant that was too high. And Isleta Pueblo didn't like getting that water downstream. And they ended up, I think, going to court to say, you can't send us whatever it was. I don't think it was radioactive, but there was something in the water they didn't like. And that gave the principle that yes, a downstream Pueblo can say, I won't take this water. And I'm always wondering if Cochiti is going to come after Santa Fe at some point, just because we get Los Alamos water and then we add stuff to it. And by the time it gets there, it probably isn't as pristine as they might want, so that you've got to think about the user, then the downstream, and it's very complicated, isn't it, Andrew?
It is. It's very complicated, and almost everybody is downstream from someone, right? So
Yep.
we're in this place where you hear about kind of reusing water and wastewater sometimes, and I think it's important to remember that by and large, that's already mixed in with some of these streams and sources we're using. In terms of litigation, I mean, there's litigation over water, right? That is a thing that is ongoing in the state all the time. I think one of the hopes is that with planning, there's an opportunity to let communities and regions kind of prioritize projects that they want to pursue together, and that hopefully it's going to be a really challenging process because it's going to take some sort of trust building and working together to be able to share this resource. And we're projecting a time with less and less water, which frankly is going to be kind of a new paradigm for Western water, right? I mean, in the past we had more and more dams and then more and more wells. And so it's always been this process of sort of increasing access and reliability. And we're looking at kind of a different reality in a lot of ways. So trying to figure out how to share that shortage, ideally without an excess of litigation in a way that works for everybody, right? In a way that's sort of as mutually beneficial as possible. I think that's really, really the goal, right? That underlies most of, trying the regional planning approach to trying to do water management.
No, that makes sense. And Sarah, I don't know how long you've been with the office, but it seems like a little bit at least. And I remember until just recently, we were going to do one last huge water project down south and take the free flowing river and somehow send the water upstream and all sorts of crazy things. And that ended up not happening. And that's part of the planning process is do you intervene with dams and those kinds of things, or do you let the rivers flow kind of?
So I think that like a process like that, and a project that you identified, I wasn't in the state when that process was kind of outplaying, but the regional planning process, hopefully the setup of these councils and the working together, bringing people together to work on solutions, we need to think creatively, like all types of solutions need to be on the table. And I think that bringing people together and kind of having these big, messy conversations will hopefully get like the best ideas kind of to float to the top so we can kind of move forward with those. And there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit, I think, out there for us to kinda work on together before we get to, like, the super nitty-gritty messy ones that might, cause us more problems down the lane.
That's
But
right.
the idea is that hopefully these regions are, a place that we can kind of work together as a community, and that's why the regions are a little bit larger than they were last time. We're aiming to bring bigger people together or bigger groups of people together so that people with shared water resources can work on their problems together.
Okay. And on that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We're back with Conversations Different, talking to Andrew and Sarah about how we're going to do regional water planning in the state of New Mexico. Andrew, let's go back to the idea that, this is going to lead to people having more conversations. I mean, one of the things that it seems like we have to face with water planning, if there's going to be more people at the table, because when the law was passed and when the first water planning happened years and years ago, we didn't have the potential, let's say, of companies wanting to build AI stations that take up water, and there wasn't as much fracking going on in the oil industry. So we have different uses for water that we have to kind of balance with, the fact that we have to drink it and use it to grow crops, etc.
Yeah, I think balance is really the critical piece that we're trying to focus on. I think a lot of those decisions about what the how water should be used in a community, we're really trying to create some opportunity for communities to be able to determine that for themselves and to be able to weigh in on how those decisions get made and be a part of that decision making. I mean, water consumption and is something that you want to try and figure out how to manage in a way that's best, and that varies depending on where you are and what the history is and what people want to achieve there. So we're really working with this planning process to really help figure out how to balance, how much water people are using with how much water they actually have, right? With the worst case is sort of finding everybody stretched too thin. So trying to figure out how to keep that balance as the amount of water becomes less predictable, and in general less over time. But it's not our plan. It's not the intent of our group or process is to sort of decide how the water ought to get used in any community that's looking at any particular type of water use. It's really to help make sure that they can make the decisions for themselves and to give them tools to get what they need to get those things done.
Okay, that makes sense. Sarah, what you said in the last segment that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to go after. What is some of the low-hanging fruit?
I think that like our easiest, biggest, I don't know, bang for your buck solution that we can use as a state is just a better, more comprehensive conservation program across the state. So I think that there's both like an awareness aspect of water in New Mexico, and then like what is what does it take to get more water and why we should save the water we have. So I think that a lot of, I'm not originally from New Mexico, and I think that, while I am from another desert, Western desert state, a lot of people sometimes move here and they don't quite understand that, like, we're not like the East Coast. We don't have just, turn off the water when you brush your teeth, those types of things. So I think a larger, both like education about, water in the desert and what does it mean, and like what is normal, what is not normal, and how we can best save that is kind of the most broad conservation type of education that we're hoping to help. And then maybe a region would decide that they'd like to replace all the faucets or all the toilets in a more systematic way. So I think there's some definite just like technological conservation solutions that are definitely low-hanging fruit
Right.
for us.
That makes sense. No, and that's what Santa Fe did years ago with low flow toilets and showers that turn shower heads, etc. And that's like you said, that's kind of easy. Then you have to get to some harder things. And I'm hoping that infrastructure wise, we do more to get rid of asphalt so that the water goes back and recharges and those kinds of things. And there's going to be a lot of building that's going to need to be done. Andrew, when you're writing the planning process, what's the timeline? So you've had the meetings around the state, you've had the public comment, you're going to have the hearings. Then when do you expect to have a framework set?
Yeah, so we have the hearing here in the middle of October, right? So it'll be at the Willie Ortiz building right off Cerrillos Road, and also online.
See from everywhere in the state.
That's right, and participate. We could talk about that in a minute, I guess. But once we get through that, the decision-making body for this is the commissioners. So as Sarah mentioned earlier, we work at the Interstate Stream Commission, which is the name of the agency, but also it's run by a commission, which is a specific group of people. That's the Interstate Stream Commission. So the naming convention's a little challenging. But so that group of commissioners are the ones who will decide about what the rules ultimately could be. And they essentially can decide to adopt them as we propose them, to not adopt them, I guess, or to adopt them with some modifications of some scale. And I certainly don't know what they're going to do, but the biggest piece of that spectrum is adopt with some modifications, right? So that seems like the most likely place that it's going to land. So they can do that over a timeline that could be as fast as, pretty fast, hour or two to, a couple of months. And I don't know how that's going to play out exactly. But once it's done, there will be a rule. The next step after that will be to develop some guidelines. So the way the act was written, it calls for the agency to develop a rule, which is pretty set in stone, goes through this very formal process that we're in the midst of now to make sure that there's broad participation and that the thing is carefully thought over. And part of the reason for that is that it's really hard to change. We have to go through all of this again.
Oh, no.
Right. So it's fairly set. And then there's the guideline piece, which is set in the sense that there's direction given by the commission to us as staff in terms of what we're supposed to do. But also they could go in and change that if, there are lessons learned a couple of years into this process, or if the goals of the process expand or change over time. So the next piece we'll do is the guidelines. We have in the past put out what the proposal would be for some draft guidelines, but with the place we're at now, we're going to have to kind of build the guidelines around whatever the rules end up being. So anyway, we'll get the rule finished. We'll get the guidelines down. My guess is that happens sometime by spring. We also have, of course, the holidays and the session coming up in there. And then once that's finished, it will be time to kind of really start doing planning kind of in earnest. So there are proposed to be 9 regions, and that we would tackle them working with 3 regions at a time for a period of 2 years. So we'd start with 3 initial regions, and we'd really focus on getting their first regional plans ready, over their first regional water security plans ready over the next 2 years. And that would be starting sometime first half, middle of next year to get that done. And then following on with subsequent, the subsequent like 4 through 6 and then 7 through 9 regions to get all of those finished. And then once they're up and running, the hope is really that the regions are different, right? That they're going to do things in a different way that really is sort of designed to meet the needs of the group there. So the rule has some proposed minimums of updates at least every 10 years. But we're really hoping that once we have plans in place and kind of can get the initial framework established and the councils built up, that they can really operate pretty independently and they can start kind of differentiating themselves based on their needs. And some regions have really complicated water rights processes and are on rivers that have lots of active changes, and having updated planning frequently makes a lot of sense. And some areas are on groundwater, where monitoring the groundwater use and trying to provide conservation strategies is a pretty good long-term strategy and maybe doesn't require quite as much maintenance. That was a really long answer. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's complicated. And Sarah, it sounds like this is something that is sort of outside the political realm, in that, you know, you're going to have how many governors in charge of the state as this process continues?
Yeah, so the aim, I mean, I drink water, you drink water. Most people I've met drink water, except for the one lady in Clovis who told me she only drinks Diet Coke.
Oh,
I would
well,
love
bless
for
your
them
heart.
to I would love for anyone with a tap basically to be involved in this process. So
Yeah.
inherently, this should be a process that is accessible, ongoing, and just, you know, a forum to bring people together to solve problems. And ideally, not not no, I mean, like, water is going to be political. There's no way around that. But hopefully, we can all come together because we all drink water.
Yes, we do. And I was thinking about, you know, just the choices we have to make. I mean, we need houses in Santa Fe. We've written about that. Everyone knows it. And every time we write that, someone says, well, where will they get the water? And my answer is always, we might not grow as much alfalfa in the state. You know, there's going to be some differences, but obviously I'm not an alfalfa farmer. So for those people, you know, some of their livelihoods are going to be affected. So how do you, in the planning, deal with I mean, think about the emotions. I mean, that's going to be tough, isn't it?
Never promised it would be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
it's a really a huge question too, right? It's people's livelihoods and really the culture of a lot of parts of New Mexico, and this is true all over the West. I mean, I know, of course, like everyone, I believe New Mexico is exceptional. The statistics about how much water and land goes to agriculture are not that exceptional, right? We're kind of in line with a lot of other states in the same part of the country and the same size, and trying to figure out how you balance having less water and kind of changes and how it's available with sort of traditions about how water's used and the economy and how it's set up and how it supports families. I mean, it's just a huge issue to be tackling. And I really think that's kind of why regional planning is going to be the approach to take. Because I think, I mean, there's not going to be a successful solution that doesn't have buy-in from the communities that it's trying to help, right? So I think trying to work with them to build the plan and figure out how they want to use their water and manage it moving forward is what we're hoping to do.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard.
It is hard. And I guess what always gives me a little hope is when you look at a country in the desert, like in the Middle East, those countries, they do a lot of things that we're not doing yet. So you can see that there's more to do that we can do. And maybe this process will kind of jumpstart that. Do you think that's possible, Sarah?
I mean, I think all solutions need to be considered and are on the table. So I think that it's definitely looking at, other desert societies, Middle East, Australia, lots of other places that are really, really dry. We can look to them for inspiration, for different ideas. But I think when it comes down to it, we need to also continue to strike balance with the water that we do have, because, putting in, these kind of more larger infrastructural solutions it's gonna take 50 years probably, or a couple $1 billion. So, even if we start that process today, we probably still need to kind of figure out how to strike balance and, continue striking balance, much like a teeter-totter.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it once and we're gonna get out of balance. You got to do it again. Kind of an ever negotiating process, which is what we're hoping that these councils can help facilitate. These bringing people together to balance these interests.
No, that's true. And we still have to figure out, we haven't, as a state, we have water rights that are allocated but haven't been adjudicated. So there's just a lot of extra stuff that we have to do. And our system of water rights is so different from some parts of the country. So it's always a complex process in New Mexico, isn't it?
It is, but also, people lived in New Mexico from time immemorial, and we can continue to thrive here even in a drier future. So I wouldn't give up hope yet that we as New Mexicans can figure out a way to continue to be here.
Oh, good. And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support. We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.